Did you know the same port of Jaffa that Jonah from the Bible left from is the same port that the early Zionists and the early leaders of the state of Israel came into this land through? Shalom, friends. This is the Kiva Gurs with Israel in 5, where we give you everything Israel in 5 minutes. Please like and subscribe and ask any questions in the comments below or continue the conversation there as well. So Jaffa is a beautiful city. Let's pause for a second, actually. Jaffa is right next to Tel Aviv. In fact, today they're considered one city. Tel Aviv is less than 120 years old. It was started in 1909, so that's about 115 years old, okay? And it was started on the sands that were just outside of the city of Jaffa. Back then, it was just all sand dunes. About 115 years ago, when the Jews first started to lay the foundations for the city that eventually became the cultural center of the modern state of Israel. Before that, it was just Jaffa in that area. Jaffa was the main city, and this is a city that goes back 4,000 years. And when you go there, you get a sense, you get a feel that this is an ancient city sitting right on the Mediterranean. We know from the Bible that's the place where Jonah, right, takes off, right? He runs away from God and he gets onto the ship and has the whole experience of what happens on the ship and the well and the whole story that we know. That same place, that same city, right? That same area is the same place that the early Zionists came into when they were coming from Europe, from Russia, escaping anti-Semitism and pogroms. Those same people who came here and created the first Jewish agricultural settlements in the modern day era. Now, of course, there were Jews living here, there were tens of thousands of Jews living here, but they mostly lived in urban environments in Jerusalem and Hebron, in Tiberias and Sfat. They were mostly learning Torah and praying and living a very kind of ascetic religious lifestyle. Those Zionists who came in from Europe, from Russia, they came on boats and they came to Jaffa because that was the main port. Right? And they came through that same place that had been used as a port of entry and exit for thousands and thousands of years. Now, there's one story, actually, of a man. His name was David Gurin. Some people say his last name was David Green. And he came from Russia, and he was part of the Zionist movement. And he came here in 1906, and he came to Jaffa. Okay? And it's not a deep water port, so there were like these kind of, water taxis that came out from the shore and would pick people up with their luggage and bring them back in. Now he remembers that he had to pay to get onto the boat, which makes sense. It's a service, you pay for the service. But then they made him pay again when he got off, and he realized, okay, you know what? The Jews are not being treated fairly here. They're lacking power and appropriate control here. And he wanted to be part of changing, not to control other people, but to increase the strength and the presence and the power of the Jews in their ancient ancestral homeland. And he got to Jaffa, he got off the boat, he starts walking around Jaffa, and he said to himself, this is not why I came, right? Because back then Jaffa was very, very dirty and very, very kind of, crowded and old and kind of falling apart. And he's like, this was his first time in the Holy Land, even though he had dreamed of it for so long. He was 20 years old at the time. He said, this is not what I came for. And he walked into Jaffa, and he walked through Jaffa, and he walked out of Jaffa. And he kept walking until he got to one of the first early agricultural settlements. And he started to be a farmer there. And shortly after that, he said, you know what? We're back in our land. We need to, re-Hebrewize our names and take on the names from our ancient Jewish and Hebrew past. And he chose a name from Jewish history, and he changed his name from Green or Gurin to Ben Gurion. That was David Ben Gurion, who was 20 years old when he first came through Jaffa port, right, into this land. Of course, that was Israel's first prime minister, and to date, one of the most influential and powerful prime ministers that Israel has ever had. Now, Jaffa is a very, very interesting place because eventually, I said, in 1909, Tel Aviv was created first as a very, very small community. Then it grew and grew and grew over the decades into what is today this huge cosmopolitan type of urban environment right next to Jaffa. So they really contrast each other, but eventually they did become one. But when you go from Tel Aviv into Jaffa, you feel quite the difference. Jaffa feels much smaller, much more ancient, and you're walking around this cobblestone kind of paths and walkways. And it's a really, really special and unique place. It has a lot of history. It's right by the ocean. It has this interesting mix of Jewish and Muslim and Christian. You can see, synagogues, you can see mosques, and you can see churches. and all kinds of people walking around. A lot of artists have been attracted to that area, probably because of the water, just the beautiful natural environment. And of late, it's become kind of a little bit more invested in more restaurants, more cafes, and art studios, and has attracted a lot more people both to live there and also to visit. Right, so it's incredible to see, you know, this ancient city of Jaffa, 4,000 years old, right next to this modern city of Tel Aviv, like we said, less than 120 years old, right? Really, you know, having that contrast, but they're right next to each other and creating one city that people love to visit. So again, you can go to Jaffa, you can remember and learn about it, connect to the ancient history there. You can learn about it and experience and connect to the modern day life there. And that's so much of what Israel really is. It's these layers of history. And today, it's the modern and the ancient all mixed together. You know, sometimes literally like, right next to each other, if not just right down the street from one another. And Jaffa is a perfect example of that.